Good afternoon and welcome to Out on a Limb. I'm Matt Trogdon, here with my good friend Morgan Housel.
How's it going?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm here.
Good. This week, Morgan, you took on the common investor and his or her common misconceptions about the stock market. What's going on there?
Well, there are two. Which one are we talking about? You need to tee this up.
Market returns.
Okay.
Market returns.
Okay, we'll talk about that because we have a lot of misconceptions to talk about today. There was a really interesting poll that Gallup took a couple weeks ago. They asked 1,000 U.S. investors, how much do you think the stock market went up last year? And almost nobody got it right. So for some background, the stock market went up 30% last year.
Yeah, it was a huge year.
Which is the fifth best year in the last half century. It was just an incredible year. But more investors thought the market actually declined last year than thought it did as well as it did. And about half of investors were totally off, thinking that maybe the stock market went up 5% or 10% or 15%. They were just totally clueless. And this is not a one-year fluke or that people just got some of the months wrong. If you go back to surveys of the last 5 years that have asked investors, what do you think the stock market did in the last 12 months? People have been totally off, and they've completely underestimated how much is done. In 2009, the market went up 25%, and 2/3 of investors thought it declined after it had one of its best years ever. And it was similar in 2010 and 2011 and 2012. And so I think what goes on here is you had a big crash in 2008, and that scared a lot of people. A lot of people left stocks. And then even if you have a big market rally after that, people don't want to believe it's true. They want to hide. They want to put their head under the sand, since they're not participating in it and not believe it's true. And then so I wrote in the article that the title of the article was "You Are the Problem," because a lot of people don't trust the stock market and they're afraid of it and they think it's a scam and they think it's a crapshoot. But you see these surveys and you realize they just have no idea what's going on. And the biggest problem in the market, it's not the market's returns, it's people's own expectations and their own behaviors and their own biases that lead them to problems.
So let's just talk about what people would have missed out on in the last 5 years if they didn't believe that the stock market was a good place to be.
Well, in the last 5 years, the market is up about 200% if you include dividends. And that's cherry picking, of course, because 5 years brings you back to 2009, which was like the peak of the financial crisis. But even if you look at the last 10 years, even if you adjust for inflation, people have earned like 80%. That's just looking at the S&P 500, just at a broad index, which is pretty good. That's a great return over a 10-year period. It's not knocking the lights out, but historically, that's a pretty decent return. So even looking at 10 years, which includes the worst financial crisis in the last century, it's still pretty decent.
So you mentioned that part of the problem was an emotional one. People see a big crash, and that's all they remember. But I have to wonder, as part of the financial media, are we getting it wrong? Are we not doing our jobs right to convince people that the market is a good place to be?
Well, there's an overwhelming tendency in financial media to talk about what's happening this hour and this minute and today, and maybe if you're a long-term thinker, the next week. That's really the time frame of the media. And there's really not much focus because there's not much demand from readers to talk about what has happened in the last 5 years, what might happen in the next 5 years. It's just much quicker than that. And I think that is the fault of the media, but I think the media does it because that's what readers demand. So it's a chicken and an egg problem as far as how you fix it.
That's certainly a tough one to crack. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm good. Okay. Another thing you took on was misconceptions around the cost of college. Talk a little bit about that.
So the cost of tuition has ballooned over the last 2 decades. It's increased about 3 times the rate of inflation. And that's a big story over the last 10 years.
Right,
you see that all over the time.
College isn't worth it.
And it's true. The sticker price of tuition has just exploded over the last 2 decades. But what's also increased almost just as much are grants and scholarships. And when you factor that in, the actual amount that people pay for tuition over the last 2 decades has increased at a fraction of the rate that the sticker price of tuition has increased over the last 2 decades. And that rarely gets talked about. When you see how much college tuition has gone up, they're just talking about the sticker price. But the median student does not pay that. The median student is getting a pretty good grant and scholarship that's going to bring that way down. Now, there are a lot of students out there that will end up paying the sticker price. And those are primarily students that come from higher income families who aren't going to qualify for scholarships. So like the big story with tuition, I think, over the last 2 decades, isn't so much that tuition has increased. It's that the price of college has become much more discriminatory based on your parents' income. Mm-hmm. If you have richer parents, you're going to pay that sticker price, and that's a lot. If you have poorer parents, you're probably going to get a pretty decent scholarship. And then the increase over the last 20 years, when you factor in that scholarship, is way less than the headlines would suggest.
So you're telling me I should go to college. I should buy and hold stocks. This is a lot of establishment stuff here, Morgan. How do I know that you're just not part of the establishment conspiracy that's out to get me?
You did go to college, didn't you?
I did go to college,
and
yeah.
you do hold stocks?
I do.
So we're done here.
Good answer.
Okay.
Thanks, Morgan. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.